Ukraine has acquired a new long-range weapon, the Flamingo cruise missile, capable of hitting targets located at a distance of more than 3,000 kilometers. A photo of the missile was published on Facebook by photographer Evrim Lukatsky. According to the author, he managed to capture the new weapon at the Defense Enterprise Fire Point. Its location has not been disclosed. Media noted that in its characteristics, the Flamingo is similar to the FP-5 missiles, the total weight of which is 6 tons, the warhead is 1,000 kilograms. The Ukrainian Flamingo is capable of flying at a speed of 850 to 900 kilometers per hour. While official technical specifications have not yet been disclosed, the missile's design appears similar to the FP-5 system presented earlier this year by the UK-based Milanion Group at the IDX 2025 Defense Exhibition in Abu Dhabi. Observers note that Ukraine's Flamingo may share comparable parameters, though confirmation from official sources is still pending. Until now, the Russia-Ukraine conflict has been characterized mainly by the use of drones and short- and medium-range missiles. However, the launch of Flamingo could escalate the war to a more severe and catastrophic level. This increases the risk of Moscow's retaliation and further destabilizes the situation in the region. According to experts, if the peace plan initiated by US President Donald Trump fails, the use of Flamingo missiles could escalate the Russia-Ukraine war to a more tragic level in the coming months. In any case, Ukraine's production of such a ballistic missile is not good news for the Kremlin. This weapon will undermine Russia's military and political balance, becoming one of the most serious threats to the country's security architecture. In May, President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky ordered efforts to speed up the development of ballistic missiles. Mikhailo Podolyak, advisor to the head of the office of the President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky, said the missile's range could reach up to 700 kilometers. At the same time, advisor to the President of Ukraine on strategic issues Alexander Kamyshin recently stated that Ukrainian ballistic missiles are already in serial production.
A number of sources unofficially report that a group of the FSB from Moscow with the highest powers is working in the Crimea annexed by the Russian Federation, allegedly investigating the entourage of the Russian head of Crimea, Sergei Aksyonov, for abuse of power, conflicts of interest, and corruption. One of the Crimean human rights activists, speaking on condition of anonymity, told Krim.Reli that security forces from Moscow were working in the building of the Russian government of Crimea. My sources in the Council of Ministers of Crimea reported that the security forces have uncovered this quiet little world with inflated staff under Aksyonov's roof. This week, an ambulance even had to be called to the Council of Ministers as some people fell ill after visiting the office of the head of Crimea. But the security forces are not only interested in the Council of Ministers, they are paying great attention to Yevpatoria, where big problems are expected for the local leadership, the human rights activist reported. According to the human rights activist, the work of the security forces landing party came as a complete surprise to the top officials of the Russian vertical of power in Crimea. Recently, we have been seeing high-profile cases of confiscating illegally accumulated wealth from current or former high-ranking officials in Russia. This is due to the rapid growth of the budget deficit under sanctions. According to my information, the Russian leadership of Crimea has long been causing discontent in the Russian presidential administration with its insatiable appetites. The mass development of the peninsula by developers affiliated with the top officials of the Russian government in Crimea, with numerous violations, including environmental ones, forced Moscow to give the command to the security forces. So Aksyonov will have to share the billions he has accumulated and leave for another position, most likely outside of Crimea, the human rights activist said. He also noted that This situation indirectly confirms the Kremlin's intentions to end the war in Ukraine. Aksyonov was not touched, given his merits in the militarization of Crimea, but he overdid it here too. His personal army, Bars Crimea, became numerous and well organized. Constant exercises at the peak of the resort season raised many questions in Moscow. And the presence in the leadership of the Bars Crimea of such odious personalities as the notorious Samvel raises concern in Moscow and the understanding that Aksyonov imagines himself to be a local Tsar, the human rights activist noted. The authors of the resource point out that Aksyonov annually reports on the implementation of the federal target program for cash execution, ignoring the real results of the commissioning of objects. Abandoned construction sites multiply, and advances to contractors at the end of the year mask inefficiency. This leads to the conclusion about the possible theft of budget funds. Crimean activists have long pointed out the isolation of the Russian vertical power in Crimea from the Crimean people. On August the 13th and 14th, the Russian armed forces conducted offensive operations in the area of Yunakovka and Sadki. At the same time, the Ukrainian armed forces conducted their counterattacks in the area of Stepnoye, Yablonovka and Novokonstantinovka. Analysts from the Institute for the Study of War have announced the situation in the Sumy region. The representative of the Ukrainian Border Service, Andrei Demchenko, stated that Russian sabotage and reconnaissance groups are trying to penetrate into unspecified areas of the Sumy region. On August the 14th, an enemy FPV drone attacked a civilian vehicle in the Yunakovka community. A ZWAR correspondent associated with the northern group of Russian forces stated that units of the 40th Marine Brigade and the 382nd Marine Battalion of the Russian Armed Forces retreated from Sumy region towards the international border and are now scattered chaotically in the area of Yelizavetovka in the Kursk region. He also stated that the recent rotation to replace units of the 155th Marine Brigade with units of the 810th Brigade in Alexeyevka was very difficult. In fact, the rotation was carried out, but not as effectively and efficiently as the Kremlin would have liked. Anvar drone operators strike Ukrainian armed forces positions in the Mogritsa area, and Rubicon drones strike positions in the Kianitsa area. Recall recently, Ukraine's defense forces have liberated the village of Bezsalivka in Sumy Oblast from the Russian occupying forces. The operation involved units from the 33rd Assault Regiment and the 24th Assault Battalion. Bezsalivka, a village of 91 residents located on the Volfa River at the border with Russia, sits within the Bilopilia territorial community. The village's position places it approximately 30 kilometers west of heavier fighting elsewhere in the Sumy Oblast, where Russian troops have advanced to within 30 kilometers of the regional capital. According to Yuri Zark, head of the Bilopilia community, several residents remained in Bezsalivka as of early July, despite refusing evacuation offers. The liberation represents part of Ukraine's recent counter-offensive efforts in the border oblast. Ukrainian forces pushed Russian forces out of several small villages at the end of July, following a period when Ukraine's defense of the area stabilized over June. The fighting intensifies more than 2 months after Russia opened this northeastern front. Russian forces made significant gains on Ukraine's side of Sumy Oblast over May and June, shortly after Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered the military to begin creating a security buffer zone along the border with Ukraine. The current operations follow Ukraine's earlier successes in the oblast. On the 25th of July, the 225th Assault Regiment completed clearing and securing the village of Kindrativka in Sumy Oblast. In June, President Volodymyr Zelensky announced that defense forces had succeeded in pushing Russian troops from Sumy Oblast's border areas, including the liberation of Andriivka.